Thank you very much. Thank you for the great introduction. My name is Yoshiharu Hoshino, running the resort management company in Japan. Um, I have a 15 minutes presentation. Before going into the point I'd like to deliver today, let me briefly introduce myself. I was born and grew up in Nagano Prefecture, which is not very far from Tokyo. It is only a 2 hours bullet train ride. And this is one of the scenes that the environment I grew up. I ski 60 days per year right now. And I'm trying to ski as long as possible. This is my very important activities in my life. I succeeded the hotel from my father in 1991 in my hometown of Karuizawa, Nagano Prefecture. This year, we are celebrating 107 years of our operations. We do have some sub-brands under our management group. Let me show you some of the resort scenes that we are offering to our guests. This is the Hoshinoi Karuizawa total reconstruction of the hotel I succeeded from my father in 1991. This was completed and opened in 2005. It's very traditional Japanese onsen ryokan, hot spring resort, and doing very, very well, very close to Tokyo, only 2 hour driving distance. This is Okinawa scene. We have many different, see, Japan is a very long country from north to south, and that's why we have a very beautiful beach in Okinawa and very cultural locations. This is one in Aomori. We offer very local food and local culture. It's very attractive, charming location in Japan. Of course, we have 3 large ski resorts under our management. This is the one in Hokkaido, very popular destinations among the Asian travelers and also from Australia and New Zealand and the US and Europe. Hokkaido is one of the very, very popular snow destinations in the world. So we are managing the 51 properties all over Japan. For outside Japan, we are trying to expand our management expertise outside Japan right now and trying to develop new facilities overseas. Let me talk about the tourism industries and how I view the Tokyo as a very, very important role in the tourism of Japan. This is a total travel consumption volume in Japan, 258 billion US dollar per year, which is very large. I think it is a 5th or 6th largest industry in Japan already. So the volume is already large. As you see, the inbound consists only 15% right now. Most of the customers or most of the travel consumption is actually Japanese people traveling to the Japanese destinations. It looks like it's increasing and we are a growing industry. But look at the 2014 and 2018. What happens in these 2 years is inbound increase. It has been increasing for the last 15 years, but the domestic market decreases a little bit. Since it is huge volume, the total travel consumption reduces in these 2 years. That is one of the very, very important message I like to make because everybody is focusing on how many inbound travelers, international travelers we are getting this year and next year, maybe year after next. But inbound is important, but a domestic demand, which is huge in Japan right now, is also very important. As you know that population is decreasing in Japan. So how we can maintain this domestic volume is another a big issue in Japanese tourism strategy. So currently, still 85% of the total travel consumption is done by Japanese people living in Japan, traveling to the Japanese local rural destinations. This is huge, 85%. And the fact that we have this huge market really helped us during this COVID-19 pandemic period. Of course, we lost the 44 inbound market completely. So the 44 became zero last year, almost zero last year. However, we have a huge market in Japan traveling to the Japanese destinations, and we try to promote that since the last June 2020. And now, as you know, the traveling from Tokyo to the other areas is not very welcomed under the current situation. And when the COVID-19 infection number is rising. So we promoted very local short distance travel. I called it micro tourism. It could be just 1 or 2 hour drive distance, can be a 1 hour cycling distance or walking distance even. And the micro tourism was very, promotion was very successful for us. And it really worked for all other my competitors too. It's really helped the industry during this pandemic period. There are some areas, the microtourism really didn't work as much as other areas, like Okinawa. I had a very difficult time increasing the demand during this COVID-19 pandemic. And Hokkaido was very difficult. City hotels actually had a most difficult time during this COVID-19. But other destinations near in Honshu and Kyushu especially, there was a huge microtourism demand during the COVID-19. And the promotion was very successful to gain some level of demand for us to survive. That's what we've been doing for the last 18 months. So this is the market we targeted during this COVID-19 period. So let me go back to the before the pandemic time. We lost the inbound travels demand completely, but we had this growing trend of this inbound market, but we did have some problems in the promotion of this inbound travel market. Where the sustainability of this was very doubtful for me, and I've been telling many people in the government and industry people about this, but we were not really able to make effective correction to the problems when it was growing. But because of this COVID-19 pandemic, we lost this market completely. So I think it is a great chance for us to really restart this inbound travel promotions in the right way, so that when we recover from this pandemic, we will be in a much better position to have a sustainable travel demand from overseas. That's the my message. Let me explain one of the big problems that I was feeling before this pandemic period. And this illustrates the one of the largest concerns I had in this inbound trend. When the government of Japan started this inbound promotions in 2004 under the Koizumi cabinet, it was supposed to help the economy of the rural areas, rural prefectures all over Japan, because the population in those areas, we were losing the populations and losing the factories to overseas, and the tourism industry should become the new industry to help the employment in these regions. But look at the result after the 15 years after this promotion started. top 5 prefectures, top five prefectures consist 65% of the total inbound volume. I think the top 10 consist more than 85% of the total inbound consumptions. So when you look at the Kyoto and Tokyo and Osaka, you might think that the inbound is increasing and the economy is booming and the Japanese tourism industry is doing well. But look at the rest of the country, like 47 minus 5 is a 42. If you we haven't seen any the effect, or we haven't seen any demand increase in tourism industry in those regions. That is the problem. I call it inbound kaksa, meaning the inbound gap between those top 5 locations and the rest of the country. And if you look at the top 5 locations, it's Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hokkaido. It's famous locations. It's not really rural areas. That they are actually big cities. They might not actually need the new industry like tourism as much as the rest of the country. So this is the one of the problems we are experiencing. The reason is how these transportation systems are structured in Japan. We have 98 very good airports all over Japan. Many of them, actually most of them, have excess capacity. They are not really utilized fully. Only 2 or 3 airports, including Haneda and Narita and airports in Tokyo, are fully utilized. And the more airlines want to fly into and fly from this, most of the airports in rural areas want to fly to Tokyo, and they don't really want to fly each other. So the problem is really it came from how this transportation system is structured. Bread train is also coming from Tokyo. It's very convenient from the people in Tokyo, but not very convenient for the travelers in Tohoku or travelers in Shikoku and so on. So but we cannot change this, and we should come up with a way to solve this problem in a different way. But there are so many great charms and attractions all over Japan, outside Tokyo. This is Kyoto. Of course, this is Okinawa, right? This is Hokkaido. And this is the Iriomote Island. Iriomote Island is listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO last month, in July of 2021. It is about to promote the tourism in this area. I'm trying to promote the ecotourism instead of the mass tourism in this area, so that we will have the sustainable, steady growth in the future. So what I'm trying to suggest here is Tokyo can become the leading tourism city. I think the tourism promotions and campaign tend to be limited to each prefectures, and how many tourists they can bring in is the most important result each prefecture has. I understand that behavior because they are using the taxpayers' money from each prefecture, so they have to all of the spendings and budget and campaigns have to be related to the number of tourists they bring in to their prefecture. But the international tourists do not have the concept of the prefecture borders. They just want to visit the different regions in Japan, and they want to get the best out of it. They don't really care which prefecture they are. So they should really cooperate each other and create a synergy effect instead of competing each other. But this was understood by many industry people for a long time, but we were not able to correct them correctly. Then I believe that Tokyo is in the best position to change that behavior in Japan, teaming up with the other prefectures around it. As you see, Tokyo is connected by transportation system to almost all of the airports, all of the regions in Japan. So teaming up with the other prefectures, Tokyo can create a new demand or can create a new set of the locations, which will help Japan to target the Japan repeat travelers, or maybe new customers who never come to Japan before. So it is not only solving the problem of Japanese inbound tourism strategy or structure, but also actually the Tokyo teaming up with the local prefecture would benefit Tokyo most. I see this kind of effect in San Francisco with the national parks in the United States, like Yosemite or Yellowstone, or Paris with the Bordeaux and the wineries around it, teaming up with the big cities in these attractive big cities, teaming up with the surrounding attractions, I think will benefit those big cities most, because when they go to different regions and enjoy, they will definitely come in to Tokyo. Tokyo can become a gateway city and spend 2 nights, 3 nights shopping and eating and enjoying the new aspects, new charms of this city. So Tokyo can change the tourism in Japan, inbound strategy in Japan, and I hope that Tokyo recognizes its role and leadership in this country. National parks. Japan was good at the cultural tourism. It has never been good at nature tourism, but we do have 34 national parks all over Japan. Tokyo City can team up with those national parks so that we can bring in the different sets of the different types of international tourism and providing them with the variety of the charms of Japan. I think my time is up. Thank you very much. And I would like to take some of the questions if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoshino. I could clearly understand the importance of Tokyo's role as a gateway for post-COVID Japan tourism. Now let's move on to the Q&A session. We have some questions from audiences. This is from Richard, Tribune News. The question is, with this pandemic corona, no tourists in Bali, how to survive your resort in Bali, Indonesia? Are you going to sell it? How about
Thank you very much for the concern that we manage in Bali. Our overseas properties, as well as our domestic properties, we are management company. So there are owners and developers for each property. We have a Hoshino Resort REIT, which is traded at the Tokyo Stock Exchange. They are also the owners of our many properties in Japan. In Bali, there's an Indonesian owner who really who invested in this resort. We designed and we planned and we are managing the resort for the owner. This Indonesian company is very strong, and he is. I don't think he is trying to sell it right now. We are trying to take some time so that this pandemic is over soon. I know that the situation in Indonesia is not very easy right now, but in 1 or 2 years' time, I'm hoping that there will be the demand coming back to Paris. During this pandemic period, I noticed that the largest number of tourists are coming inside the domestic market. It's big in Indonesia. So before the pandemic, we were trying to bring the customers from Japan and Australia and Europe and United States to Bali. But after this pandemic is over, I would like to emphasize more on the marketing the Bali Island from the domestic market. It is a huge population and very many good customers living in Indonesia. So when we are able to do that, I think the result itself is can be more stronger even during these the problem periods.
Thank you, Hoshino-san. The next question is from Fu Chuwei, Singapore Daily News. Liang He Cao Bao. It may be a wrong pronunciation though. When do you think is the timing for Japan government to reopen the border for the overseas tourists? If open, what's the basic conditions?
Yes, the most important the issue is of course the vaccination rate in Japan. It is over 35% right now. It's growth. The speed of vaccination is one of the fastest in the world right now. So in my calculations, in the mid-September of this year, the vaccination percentage will be over 50% in Japan. So the situation will soon, I think, change, hopefully in this fall. And right now, the Hawaii is accepting the tourists from Japan without any quarantine. And Japan has a vaccination passport right now being issued to travelers in Japan going to overseas. I think 6 countries signed up for this vaccination passport system, including Austria and Turkey and Italy and so on. So I think we just we will not open the border in one time to everybody in the world. I think it's a country by country basis. We open the border to United States or China, and this kind of a process will probably take more than 1 year to achieve. So my feeling is we will go through this process during the 2022 next year, and we might be able to recover from this pandemic in 2023 in terms of the international tourism demand in Japan.
Thanks very much. Please allow me to ask some questions as moderator. In the midst of an unprecedented crisis, as a Japanese business leader, how are you prepared to face this crisis?
Yes, this is something I need 30 more minutes to explain how we did it. But again, the most important thing what we have done is change the priority in a company. Long-term objective is very, very important. And brand equity was something we highly valued before the pandemic period. But all of a sudden, this is a very big crisis hitting us. So we needed to change the priority of the elements that we are managing the companies. So the cash has become one of the most important elements. So I made it clear to the people in our staff in Hoshino Resorts that we are changing the criteria. Then the less important thing became a most important thing. The most important thing became the less important thing during this pandemic period. And these quick changes were very, very important during this pandemic. But another thing is we lost the demand significantly, but we didn't really lose it completely. As I showed you, the domestic demand, Japanese people living in Japan, traveling to Japanese destinations, which is big market in Japan. So I told the staff internally that we do have a strong demand, or a big demand in Japan. It's the problem issue is whether or not we can really stimulate this demand, even during the pandemic period. And the way to do is a microtourism, so 1 hour, 2 hour travel. This was very, very successful because the people living in Japan could not really go overseas. It could not go to the Tokyo or Osaka when the infection number were rising in those big cities. So the desire to travel was satisfied in locally, and that was the microtourism. So the quick changes were probably the most important message I had in my company to survive this pandemic period.
Thanks very much. And I guess that you must have thought a lot about travel and tourism. What value will tourism have for the post-COVID world, and what will it give to people?
Yes, I think we have a lot to give to the customers in Japan and travelers coming from outside Japan. But the most important value of this tourism industry or our company, I felt during this pandemic period, is the fact that we are employing people locally in Japan, the young people and skilled people. They live around the resorts, and they have family to grow, and they are paying tax locally. And the tourism industry is taking a very, very important responsibility to maintain the rural area economy in Japan. And I felt that very much during this pandemic period. We were working with the suppliers in these areas, the food suppliers and some of the craft suppliers and activity suppliers. And they were also, they lost the market during this pandemic period. We were able to collaborate with them much closer during this period than before the pandemic. I think we were able to establish a very good relationship with them because of this pandemic. And the relationship we established will probably help us come up with the much attractive travel experience to the customers after this pandemic period.
Thank you. And are there any ways that the Tokyo metropolitan government can collaborate with or support recovery of tourism post-COVID, including the Tokyo Gateway concept?
Yes, of course. The vaccination speed is so important right now. I think the government is doing, and Tokyo local government is doing the best it can to accelerate the speed of vaccinations in Tokyo. I think I'm looking at the number almost every day on the website, and it's a remarkable achievement I think that Tokyo is making. So that is the most important role of the government. It's vaccine is in our hands, so we need to increase the vaccination percentage. The 20s and 30s, there are so many percentage of people who are not willing to take the vaccinations. It's up to them whether or not they would take that. But I think it's very, very important for the government of Tokyo to deliver the correct message, information to them, so that the more people are willing to be vaccinated. That will help not only the tourism industry, but also the economy of this big city.
Thank you very much. One more question is coming in, and
yes,
following your explanation, the important cash fund, are you planning to have the money from the stock market, listing on the stock market in the nearest future?
The Hoshino Resort has been the private family companies for the last 107 years, and we are working with the owners and developers, and they own the facilities and properties. So there was no strong need to be public from our side. We are not really owning any properties. Not owning meaning we don't need to borrow money from the the bank, financial institutions, or we don't need to really raise the funds to own or develop the facilities. So at the current moment, we don't have any plan to be listed or to go public, but we don't hesitate to do so if necessary in the future. It might not be my generations, it might be next generations. I think at the current moment, I think we will be okay. We will be able to overcome this pandemic. And as a matter of fact, there are so many properties all over Japan that are in trouble managing it. Very difficult situation because of, we are helping them. We are helping them to survive, and some of the properties will be under our management. We definitely like to provide our expertise if necessary to help them keep managing their properties. So especially the hotels in cities are suffering most. And we opened the 3 hotels in Kyoto during this pandemic. There will be more in Osaka and more in Hokkaido. We are working on it very, very hard so that these hotels can survive and overcome this pandemic.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is the final question from me.
Yes.
The Tokyo 2020 Games are being held in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. There is also harsh criticism. What should Japan's leaders, especially in politics and businesses, learn from this experience, and what should they change? I think that could be the game's legacy. What do you think?
It is natural that there are some people who are against the Olympics, but there are also so many people supporting the Olympics. Holding and sponsoring this Olympic Games during the middle of the pandemic is not very easy. But it is true that Tokyo probably could have been one of the very few cities who could really execute these games during this pandemic period. Many of my friends overseas are telling me that we are so lucky to have Tokyo to sponsor this year's Olympics. So I think we should be very proud of it, proud of what we have done. I think the discussion time is over, so we have to all support whatever the Olympic Committee is doing, and the volunteers are working, and I'm hoping that the Olympic Games, sponsoring Olympic Days in 2021 will become something we can be very, very proud of in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoshino. And I'm afraid it's time to go.
Yes.
And that's it for the Q&A session.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And please visit Japan after this pandemic.
Hoshino-san, could you give the international media some final words?
Yes. I think I really like you to watch the marathon game in Sapporo, which is in Hokkaido. They are working very hard. There's so many pro Olympics and anti-Olympics discussion going on, but the volunteers are working very hard to really conduct these games and execute them correctly and so on. And I think this is a great, we have to make it a great moment to promote the Japan to overseas. We lost the demand during the Olympic period, but I'm hoping that having these Olympic Games will help us really promote the tourism in Tokyo after the pandemic. I'm hoping that it should be over in 2 years, and I'd definitely like you to encourage all of you to visit not only Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, those famous cities. As I said, please visit rural areas. I'm sure you will be very surprised at how charming they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoshino, for your enthusiastic presentation today. This concludes Mr. Hoshino-san's session.